Nice. All right. I mean, apparently we're on this whole like, how do we get tokens out into the world effectively? What are tokens good for type of train, especially as the markets do what the markets do and acquisitions happen and the fundamental theories about the stories that we told ourselves about why tokens are valuable and maybe come up into question a little bit. But I mean, you're leading an organization that has probably been in crypto longer than I have, which is not many, I guess, that are doing that, and in the same business, frankly, of selling tokens. So CoinList been a part of some of the biggest token issuances over time. Big news this week was that you guys are going fully on chain, which doesn't seem like big news, but also does seem like big news, sort of knowing the history of the organization and probably some of the challenges they've had to navigate over the years. So, you want to just catch us up? Where's CoinList today? Why is this such a big moment in your history?
Yeah, when CoinList started, the options for being non-custodial on-chain, they were frankly like not great for end users. The users that we had at that point were accredited investors when we first started, with the Filecoin sale. Crypto nativeness was not in their DNA. And then as our customer base evolved to being more retail, true retail, those people again had difficulties, managing their own keys, understanding how gas worked, understanding how all the nuances of being on chain worked. And so we went with this custodial system where we manage the keys on behalf of the user, manage the wallets on behalf of the user, create an amazing UX. I mean, it's so easy to use. You don't have to worry about gas. You don't have to worry about cross-chain intricacies, any of this stuff. Like you don't have to worry about any of it. And it let us do all these novel different L1s, all these different products that may have had nuances on participating on chain, Solana, Near, you name it, right? Flow, Mina, of course. So there's so many different chains that we were able to work with because of this structure. But over time, I mean, the world shifted, everything's changed. Not your keys, not your coins. I'm a huge believer in that. And with tools like Privy, with other participants out there, it's so easy to make it so that users can have a great experience on chain and own their own end custody. So be responsible for their own assets. Our customers want this. Like everybody's been asking for this. They're like, look, we just want to get the tokens delivered to us when the token sale's done. And you see a lot of the new entrants really being on chain and moving in this direction. So non-custodial is one part, and then the on-chain part is having those smart contracts integrating into those ecosystems on day one. That allows for transparency, but it allows for composability. Like what happens after you're able to finish a token launch, a primary issuance, an ICO on chain, and then all of a sudden you can interact with every lending pool, every AMM, all those different products. So the world shifted dramatically from 2017. There's plenty of more innovation here, and we're excited to start taking a shift towards that, just as everybody seems to be going towards our old model, which, by the way, I think is great from a user experience perspective. I think fintech should do that, especially if they have all the compliance mechanisms for that. But for us, like the future is kind of clear. It's happening on chain. We want to tap into where our users want us to be. We want to tap into where the industry is going, and we want to be a part of crafting the future.
Yeah, I mean, what do you guys make of the competitive landscape today and how you're positioned in it? Like, obviously first mover kind of dominated the 2017 to 2021. Then there were a few years of like, where I think you guys still dominated. There just weren't really many ICOs. And then suddenly they came back and all these competitors emerged, like, Legion, Echo, Coinbase, MetaDAO, a bunch of people serving kind of the long tail. So like, how do you make sense of how to kind of position within that and try to maintain this kind of 5-year lead that you guys built?
I think it's awesome. It's great. Like competition is good. It creates urgency within an organization. It creates a Cambrian explosion of ideas. People are testing different pads. Some pads kind of, you already know how they're going to end up. And some of them you're like, whoa, that's interesting. That's neat. Let's monitor that. For example, I think Coinbase doing the monad sale is hugely validating for the space. When I stepped into the role 4 years ago, my general idea was that everybody's going to be doing token sales. Everybody's going to be doing ICOs. It's going to be just a thing. And reality is stranger than fiction. We're here 4 years later, and everybody will be doing token sales. There's a whole bunch of unannounced platforms from fintechs and things like that. And it's going to be, we're entering this strange era, especially as the regulatory environment's changing, where it will be okay to offer this product and this type of experience to users. And you're like, wait, like, why do normies or people need to be doing token sales? And I think it's about the process of giving that ability to be early to everybody. You don't just have to be there on the secondary listing day. You can be a part of primary issuance. You can be a part of that TradFi process of that IPO book building. And so I'm a big believer in that, in giving retail an early opportunity to get in early. I think there's a lot we can improve on. There's way more that we can do to be better across the industry and CoinList specifically. I think really interesting things with some of the on-chain players. I think MetaDAO is definitely something to watch. I think it's right now maybe probably more of an advanced pump, which is not, a shot in any way, just more of like, that's how the industry is evolving. And I think that's really cool. And we should keep an eye on what's happening there. I think Echo is great. I think the early stage access is important, but there's a little bit of nuance on like, look, there's a huge amount of risk in early stage. And we have to ask the question of who should be participating when and how much risk tolerance does a person have. And then you get into the whole complication around, we do need better regulations, because at some point you're just selling a security to somebody and people want better ownership structures, but how far away is that from a security? And so we need to answer a lot of these difficult questions in the next couple of years. And I think we need to innovate on better on-chain structures that help us avoid some of those hairy regulatory things that are going to be coming up.
I think one of the simple yet probably impossible to answer question is, in my mind, is like, what are tokens good for? And so I'm assuming some version of that question is asked probably by yourself. I mean, anybody in the space, but especially when you approach thinking about which projects to work with and how to communicate sort of the value and the opportunity to a potential purchaser. So I'm curious what your answer to that question is. What are tokens good for?
I mean, that's the ultimate question, right? That's the biggest question. I think that, we had this old structure back in the day where we used to compartmentalize things into money and store of value tokens, utility tokens. I don't know if you guys remember that, but there used to be these buckets for all these different types of tokens. And I think that framework generally is still pretty good. There's a clear reason why an L1 needs a token. And if an L2 truly decentralizes, it's pretty clear why that needs a token. Those are network-based systems, and there's a utility to that token where gas will be consumed, and hopefully there's staking and there's security of the network to be enforced. Once you start getting into the long tail, it becomes a case-by-case conversation, For example, it's like, does BNB need to exist? Does Binance need a token? But look at all of the innovation that's come from having that token. Not only the chain itself, I'm talking about all the different products that they can create that allow their community to better interact with Binance products, despite what you think of them, right? Like Launchpool and things like that, I think are very clever and interesting. Similarly with MetaDAO, I think that having token holder voting, I think that with some projects where they're able to use the token as a feedback loop into the actual product itself, that's powerful and that's interesting and new. And it allows you to take the cult aspects of crypto, the community aspects of crypto, and merge it with a product that gets better as a function of having the token. So that's like the big thing we look for, is like, hey, is your product actually going to get better by having a token, or are you just like slapping on reward points, right? Now, you get into more complicated ones where people are like, we have a token, but all we're going to do is buy back and burn. And it's like, well, I don't know, right? It gets a little bit more complicated there. But I think the projects we tend to work with have a clear story on why their token makes their product better and why their product couldn't exist in the first place without a token. Again, like you can even say that the token could help you tackle a very difficult problem through decreasing the cost of customer acquisition that wouldn't be possible in traditional means. For example, some of the deep end projects where, like if your alternative is like you have to go raise 500 million from VCs who would never give you money to go acquire cell phone towers, but instead you can say, hey, if we have a token, we can convince everybody to run these devices locally in their home to participate in the spectrum. That's interesting. That's cool. That's like, okay, there's a story there. Inevitably, there's always a risk assessment to these though. You never quite know how things are going to turn out. So you make a best effort of saying, this sounds like a clear story. This could work. We have 70% conviction. And that's why they're early stage investments.
I'm interested in how you guys are approaching navigating the regulatory landscape today, especially as kind of some of these more disruptor projects are willing to go further out on the risk curve or get ahead of, the perceived regulation that's coming. Like, how do you balance, I don't know. Yeah. How do you balance that trade-off internally?
I hope my legal team's not listening.
Yeah, we kicked him out of the chat. Okay.
Right. look, that's probably the most difficult part of the job, is the nuance and the decisions around the policies that we've constructed. So look, the most important thing is that you want to, in this type of product, in a token launch product where you're accepting funds from individuals, you got to KYC, KYB people. You have to. You cannot trip AML laws. OFAC will come down and cause an immense amount of pain. So you do not want to mess with that at all. From there, you want sophisticated policies around, again, like your AML policy. You want to make sure that you have internal fraud policies. You want to be above board in everything that you do. Some people don't have that. We've been around for a while where, executive teams based in the US, similar to your Coinbase and whatnot. And so, we take that stuff pretty seriously. Now, in terms of like what tokens you offer, all those kind of things, it gets really tricky when something's clearly a security. So we're not gonna, do that. Now, some other novel new launchpad may decide to work with them, and that's totally fine based on their risk assessment. We just don't want to take that kind of risk. As the regulations evolve, though, and as we get, probably the type of licenses that allow you to do that, and we can compartmentalize those things, sure, we'll get into that business. But I think right now we primarily avoid things that are very clearly securities. And that's just not within our risk assessment. But everything else is more of a conversation of grays. Like you have to do a due diligence on the team. You have to KYB the issuing, the token issuer, right? And the individuals involved and the ownership structure. So you have to go pretty deep down this. Whereas some of the other launchpads might be like, oh, cool, you've got a token. Great, come on in and let's get the party started, right? And I think that if you have that perspective, you have to have far more sophisticated guardrails on the other side, which may be fragile and break and not be compatible with future regs. So I don't know if that answers that question. That's kind of how we operate.
No, I think, yeah. I'm curious how you're conceptualizing the sort of business opportunity here over the next couple of years. You've seen it for 5 years. I think it's probably been a really good business at some times, maybe less of a good business at other times. Clearly, you're bullish about the future. What does this space look like, or what is the opportunity here for CoinList?
Yeah, this is the thing that we spend the most time thinking about, is like, where is everything going? Because when the market's in the dumps, you just feel this like deep depression, and you're like, where is it all? And CoinList, more than other businesses, very tapped to crypto beta, where as the altcoin cycle moves, so does CoinList. And so you have to be an optimist at the end of the day, really believe in this, or you just shut down the doors. My personal belief is that everything's going to be on chain eventually. How that looks or what format that takes, to be seen. But I think the very clear story right now is every single sophisticated TradFi person really does believe in on-chain equities. And I think you're seeing versions of that right now with Hyperliquid doing perps and Ostium doing perps. That's very interesting. That's taking a clear product market fit and bringing those assets on chain. Then you're seeing what XDocs and others are doing with bringing actual, like Superstate, bringing actual equities on chains. And there's nuance there. Like, one of them is more of a synthetic, one of them's, maybe closer to the actual equity. Whatever it is, we're going to be evolving in that. And I think CoinList is going to have a hand in that. We're doing the work right now to get way more involved in that, working with different foundations and different teams to see, hey, how do we actually get the first on-chain IPO? That's exciting. And then that like gives us a clear path, assuming the regs are in line, on, okay, we have a clear delineation between network tokens, on-chain equity, etc. And I think that fixes a lot of the problems where we have right now, where there's a divergence between equity and tokens, right? That's like the biggest problem in this space right now. I think a lot of people will have different solutions to it. The one I think that I'm most in line with and maybe excited for is the regs basically giving a pathway to on-chain equity. And I think that'll just be the pathway in the future. What else we put on chain? No idea. I mean, it seems like Jesse's got a perspective on content coins and all that kind of stuff. To me, I'm a big believer in money tokens, store of value, utility tokens, on-chain equities, things that have the financialization to them, that have clear end user value, and help the product get better. And so that's my focus, and I think CoinList focus. And but yeah, I think everything's to be on chain. I do. I really believe that. But it might not look the way we all think. And so maybe the on-chain equity, maybe the on-chain equity is too much of a pedestrian thing. Yeah.
All right, man. We got to leave it there.
Cool.
Yeah, great chatting with you. I think it is a very interesting space, very competitive space. You guys are well suited to. I mean, I don't think when is the well, I can't even use your bloody products. Both Josh and I live in a country that don't want us to get ahead, apparently.
We're going to be fixing that soon. I think
nice.
US. I think US retail very soon.
Well, Canadian retail probably after that. So still down.
After that. Right.
All right, my man. Yeah.
Take care. See ya. Bye.
CoinList moving on chain.